So welcome to this Cycling Life Leadership Bites. We're delighted today to welcome Lasse Jonasson, who's the Futurist and Director at the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies. Now, Lasse, I probably just pronounced your name with a Norwegian accent because I've spent a lot of time in Norway. How did I do? And can you say a little bit about yourself?
You did very well. If you were pronouncing my name like it should be, people would have thought you were coughing. So very good. And shortly about myself, yeah, I'm as you said, a futurist director at the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies. What we do is basically helping decision makers looking into the future within a broad number of fields, very broad. So we of course have our different niches, but in general about how society develops. Myself, yeah, I'm a dad living in Copenhagen. I have my wife and two kids, and I still consider myself as a cyclist, even though I've actually, I stopped riding my bike seriously when I was 20 years old. But it's as you might see, I'm a little bit more than 20 now. So, but it's.
Sure.
It follows your life as a companion. So I did cycling was my life until I was 20.
That's great. And you're being a little bit humble because you did race it actually at the world level. I mean, you were in the Mapei development team. And of course, we're joined by another bike rider today, Mick Rogers, who I'm sure you know and everyone knows well. What are we going to talk about today? What we're going to be talking about is the future of virtual cycling, which is an area that you're very interested in at the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies. What we're not going to be doing, though, is we're not going to be talking about, pro cycling and virtual competition, actually, because most of our audience are people like us, right? They're a little bit older. They love cycling as a recreational hobby. They may be competing, but they're not racing at the pro level. So we're not going to be talking today about the future of virtual cycling in the pro peloton. What we're going to be talking about actually is the future of virtual cycling for people like us. Okay, so that's going to be our frame. Mick, I know you have plenty of questions for Lasse, so why don't you shoot away with the first one?
Yeah, I sure do. And Lasse, thanks for joining us on today's chat. I mean, I'd like to hear your opinion on this current boom we're going through with virtual cycling in this COVID-19 period. I mean, how do you see virtual cycling developing? What are the drivers, and where do you see virtual cycling heading in the next 5 to 10 year time frame?
Yeah, excellent question. I mean that have you asked me 3 months ago, I would be quite positive towards the development path, or what has happened within the past couple of months with the COVID-19 is really pushing it even harder. But I think that there are a number of drivers really pushing this forward. First of all, it's the focus on health. It's not only pushing virtual cycling, but sports in general. People are really starting to embrace activities, and me myself being a part of business life, I see that everyone is starting to do sports, and before it was very much about a conversation about how the soccer game went in the weekend. Now it's about your own activities and so forth, and that's really pushing it. And then when we dig down into the virtual cycling, I think that first of all, this scarcity of time, everyone is really having a busy schedule. So especially the guys out there, which is also focusing a lot on cycling, that is time consuming. So I think that this is really pushing virtual cycling forward because it's so much more time efficient.
And are you seeing that, when you talk about time efficiency, because people are juggling these competing pressures of their career and their family, and then trying to fit in some sporting activities. I mean, what is unique about indoor cycling compared to indoor running, or going to the gym, or doing CrossFit or something like that? Is there anything that you see that is special in terms of fitting some of these trends that is maybe more advantageous for indoor cycling versus other kind of indoor sporting activities?
I mean that's what will be interesting to see also when the platform develops. But
Lasse, remember to look at your camera. Talk to
yeah,
your audience,
sorry,
man. You're looking over there at Mick, so keep looking at us, man.
I'm thinking, right? But I think that one of the interesting things is that when you kind of like this COVID-19 situation, which was where the question started, is really pushing people to stay at home at the moment, and that is on a societal level, it's really making a change where people realize, okay, I can actually make my work while I'm working from home, but they also realize that not having to commute back and forwards and so it's giving you a need for doing some exercise, and that's where I think that virtual cycling is gaining in, because then you can actually do a quick efficient ride on your bike from home. And that is actually where cycling can compete with running, because a lot of people are running and not cycling because it's more time efficient, but you can do the same things now on virtual cycling. So I think that's really pushing it.
Yeah.
Then,
and what about, I mean, also, I guess, for a lot of people listening to this, this webinar series, this Cycling Life series, they're urbanites, they're living in big cities. We have a lot of followers actually coming from India, living in huge urban cities like Mumbai or Delhi. To what extent is that also a factor here?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because we are gaining a lot of users through the rise of the middle class. Throughout the next 5 to 10 years, we will be more than 20% more people in the middle class, and having the same needs as the three of us probably have right now. And they live in larger and larger cities. They're exposed to pollution. If they get outside of the door, they're exposed to traffic. And riding my bike in Mumbai, I've never tried it, and I assume I would be a little bit scared of doing it. So I think that's really an advantage compared with, for example, in Copenhagen, where I live, where we have cycling paths all over. So the consciousness of the risk is really driving this forward as well.
Lasse, just one thing I'd like to get your insight on, particularly with your background. I mean, how do you see the concept developing over time? Will it be a specific virtual world that we're all cycling in, or will the cycling world start to replicate the real world by other technologies out there that we can, replicate courses, so we can, in a virtual sense, so we can just, I can ride up the Wes, I can ride down the center of Copenhagen. How do you see those elements developing as technologies become more and more sophisticated?
Yeah, it's actually a very good question, Michael, because most people have a tendency when they see new technologies, they kind of like imagine, okay, how can we do what we have done always until now, just with a new technology? But when new technologies are actually disrupting our lives, businesses, and making a change, that's when we apply technology to do something we couldn't do before. I mean, if you look at video games, for example, playing Fortnite is extremely popular, and you can jump and build, and you can do all sort of stuff you couldn't do in a real world, and that's what's interesting. And I think right now the environment is trying to replicate the real world as good as possible, and I think that's interesting, and it's a good start, but it's not where we should go. We should say, okay, how can we do stuff we cannot do in real life? And that's when
thank you, because I tried Zwift. And for me, it was the most tediously boring thing in the world, because I'm just like riding on the road with people overtaking me, random people like waving at me. I'm like, I don't even talk to people when I'm out on the road training in the real world. Why would I want to talk to some random stranger, going past me and waving me? So yeah, I understand what you're saying there, but also, isn't it about how, because in a way, virtual cycling is competing with a lot of other demands on our time, right? Recreational demands, leisure demands, sporting demands. But I'm really curious as well about, you mentioned like Fortnite. My son loves playing Fortnite, but actually what that does, it brings together gaming with social engagement, real social interaction where they're collaborating with each other and stuff like that. So how do you see virtual cycling evolving in terms of maybe crashing into or overlapping with other activities that we do, whether it's virtual social interaction, or for me, I often write about on This Cycling Life and I post videos about how I do work on my indoor trainer. I do my emails, I record videos, I manage my social media, I do phone calls. What's your view on that, this convergence of indoor biking and other activities?
Yeah, I think the difference here with indoor biking compared to outdoor biking is that suddenly you're riding on a platform that you're actually paying to access. So this is a completely different game. You're on someone else's infrastructure and you have to pay for it, and that also gives some other incentives, which is very interesting. People want to drag you to this place. So I think that what is happening is that it's a drive towards making it more and more interesting, and I would love to see Swift could very likely be bought by Epic Games, and then imagine your son playing Fortnite. What bothers me when my kids are playing Fortnite is that they're sitting still, they're moving their thumbs, right? But if there was a treadmill or something paired with that, and they had to run, I'm sure first of all they would be even more excited because they love using their body, and secondly, I would love them doing all the planning, the tactics they have to do in Fortnite, doing some exercise and speaking with their friends. So what we see in many of the solutions and compared with this scarcity of time is that you have to put stuff together. They have to do several activities, several purposes. So for example, also, I know you have written about this stuff, Jamie, that while cycling, you can talk on your phone, you can read, you can work, and that's amazing. I mean, for me,
on your indoor bike, Lasse, don't try that stuff on the road.
No, but I mean, one of the things I find really interesting of virtual cycling and the future, as you touched upon, Lasse, is right now, I mean, it's the gameplay, teamwork. Can you work together? Can we gang up with teams to beat another team? And whether it's, I mean, I'm just going to use a gold coin in the middle of the road. I mean, there's the sprint to pick the gold coin, and then you have some kind of benefit that you can use in the future. I'm not like a bigger gun, of course. I mean, that's in Fortnite, you get a bigger gun, but can we do that in cycling? And can we bring that tactical elements into virtual cycling? Then we open up a whole new world, I think, of gaming and general engagement in virtual cycling that we currently don't have within the current platforms.
Can I just touch on that, Mick, and build on that? Because, I watched the virtual Tour of Flanders. I live here in Belgium, but for me, it was kind of like, it was the most boring, tedious thing I've seen, because it was just like, it was a 30-minute exercise in pure power production.
Yeah.
And the fact was, Greg Van Avermaet could produce more watts than anybody else. But as you said, Mick, there was no sprint for the golden coin. There was no other real skills involved than pure power output. What's your view on that, Lasse?
I mean, I really agree on the boring side, and especially, I mean, in the Tour of Flanders there was a drafting element, but they have shown where there's not even a drafting element, so there's no tactics in it, and that's really boring, and no one wants to see that. How, I mean, you want to, if people cannot crash and really hurt themselves, it gets a little bit boring, right?
Right.
Well, I mean, I do know a couple of the home trainer providers are working on elements such as steering. But I mean, as the platforms become more and more advanced, I think we're going to see change of wind conditions. I think we'll see a lot of elements that replicate a little bit more what happens in the real world. And I think that'll be a good fun thing.
But Mick, I like Lasse's idea, you know, like we used to see back in the 80s with guys headbutting each other, and, you know, so maybe we could like integrate with this virtual cycling. We could bring in sort of elements of Fight Club and stuff. So is like punching out Van der Poel, and then, you know, there's you know, Bouhanni has a future here, I think.
Yeah. Everyone wants to be Bouhanni. But I think within other areas all the time, when people are trying to digitize their offerings, the first thing I'm telling them is, don't copy the real world life. It will just be a bad copy. And if you do it really good, it will be almost just as good as real life. But go in another path. Don't find don't try to invent a way to crash on your home trainer. Find something else. In most games you can do a double jump. That's just a thing.
Mick and I were talking last week, and we were saying, like, we can't wait to see virtual cyclocross, you know? Like you can imagine somebody in their living room having all of the obstacles and everything, and having to jump and run and everything. But that's kind of funny. But actually it's interesting, you know, because on This Cycling Life, you know, we don't have corporate sponsors. You know, we're kind of hoping we will get some, if you know what I mean. We're hoping we might get some sponsors somewhere down the line, but we don't. But talk to us a little bit about the commercialization aspects, and, like, you know, because in some industries, you know, like for example, I look at industries like healthcare, where they're using IoT, you know, for example, you know, a toothbrush where you can record the usage patterns of the consumer, and they get discounts on their dental insurance and stuff like that. So what do you see there in terms of these hybrid commercialization models that can go beyond simply paying for a subscription on a platform like Zwift?
First of all, the development I just spoke with time, in terms of time, it's kind of like the same in when you're commercializing your company. You need to utilize the different areas in your business model to drive efficiency forward. And when I think about virtual cycling, I think about it's a very specific target group. You're really doing something good for your body. At least if you, I don't know the health behind really pushing you hard to the edge, if that's actually good. But I think that there is a lot of data in this. We're at the moment, I'm doing a lot of work in the insurance industry, and I'm sure it will be much more interesting to have commercials on the virtual cycling platform than on McDonald's, for example. So I think that there's a lot of data here that you could utilize, and I think that it's a different path we're following. So if you look at professional cycling, the business model here, it's about sponsorship through spectators. Here suddenly it's about having people on the platform. And you can commercialize directly on that, and that's really a much more efficient model, and you have control over your users. So the incentives to also push this to be popular in the media and to watch, that's completely different. So I think here we will see a lot of tough players, and I mean, it was a funny comment having Epic Games buying Swift, but I'm serious about it, because those people are really thinking about how you are nudging people to gamifying different stuff, and once Swift has turned to Epic Games, they will know how to change this, and they won't have conservative bike riders like myself sitting there and thinking about how can you create a crosswind.
It's super exciting. I mean, Mick, maybe you can say a few words about this, because Mick, you're super excited about, you know, how do we identify the future talent, the talent of tomorrow?
Oh, sure. I mean, when I look 10, 15 years down the road, I see a cycling very different from now, because the traditional cycling that I grew up, and we all grew up here in this chat with, you'd have your local race kind of out in the back of nowhere, and you'd try to come across as many little cars, and the police turned a blind eye to it, insurance turned a blind eye to it. Let's just leave them kind of in the outback But that's becoming more and more complicated now. Let's look forward 10, 15 years again. How costly will it be to hold a local race in Copenhagen for local cyclists? The Tour de France will always be the Tour de France, the Tour of Flanders, Paris-Roubaix. They will always be there. But for everyday cyclists, I feel that won't be so simple anymore, having a local race. And I believe a lot of that will move online. And it's exciting times.
Great.
I really do believe,
Yeah, and imagine how much more efficient it is. If you want to do a race today in a physical world, you probably have to drive 2-3 hours by car back and forward. You have to get dressed and get ready and all that stuff and wait. And if you do good, you have to wait for your medal and stuff like that, right?
Wow.
Here, you just go down in the basement, you do the race, and you get back to your family.
Hang on a second, Lasse. I don't want to be competing against Greg Van Avermaet, right? Because if it was me and Mick's gonna blow my legs off, right? So I want the golden coin. I want the gamification. I want to be able to use the headbutts, throw a few punches, right? Because
no, but Jamie, it's a mix. I feel it's a mix. It's a mix of both, because in a world that strength wins 10 out of 10, after a while that becomes boring. But if there's some variability that you can use, some extra power, some smart move, or some. I'm thinking about these things, and it needs to be that it's not just a time trialers world where the strongest guy wins every day. There needs to be that variation where the sprinter or the hill climber can win as well.
And Mick, as you often say to me, right, as an advisor and a coach to me, you always say, Jamie, using your power, using your legs, that's the last resort. It's about racing with your head. So I think this is what we're getting towards. Look, Mick, I think
can I just add a
last
small?
point. We're going to have to draw it to a close in just a couple of minutes, Lasse.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, just because I think what is so interesting is also a lot of the people I'm around is very focused on training, and they're even more nerdy than when I was actually doing cycling for a living. So they're focused at getting better and better, and 5-10 years from now, we'll all have virtual assistants that could do this training performance so much better, and having a virtual platform that would really help you push the limits, do the exactly right training, and so forth. So I think that's really an advantage. We'll see that within the coming years. So
perhaps that's another topic we can come to. But also, I'm sure that might happen, the AI assistant for giving us advice on the physical stuff, but they will never replace Professor Albie.
Lastly, Jamie, this is a very interesting topic. I'd love to continue on, but I am aware of our time limit here. Thank you very much for joining us, Lasse. Jamie, thank you as always. And to our people watching online, thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And keep an eye on our feeds where we're always doing interesting content such as this. And we look forward to seeing you again on This Cycling Life. Thank you and goodbye.